One of the most commonly said problems with the sequel trilogy is how Luke, Leia, and Han seem to not be themselves. That Han regressed to the loner he was in A New Hope, that Leia would never push her son away, and that Luke would definitely never abandon them. And if growth was linear and we always stayed the same, these people would be right, of course, but we all know that's not the case. Things happen, sometimes we regress because of them, and we're going to see the world differently after 20 years. I think Muhammad Ali said it best when he said, a man who sees the world the same at 40 as he did at 20 has wasted 20 years of his life, and I do think that there is truth in that, and I think that when they were making these movies that there was a general idea for how they were going to get there. We just didn't get to really see it until Rise of Skywalker. Which, of course, feels blasphemous to say. I'm not even saying that Rise of Skywalker was a great movie, just that it had little moments where it could explain things, but even then, I don't think they were really able to fully do what they wanted to with this movie because of the unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher and then the executives meddling in it because they were afraid after the reception to The Last Jedi. I don't think we were going to get the story as it was originally intended because of those things, but there were still little pieces there, and this could also be why we get Lando in the movie instead of what probably should have been Leia, and it's definitely why we get that scene with Han and Ben towards the end. But this scene here is the explanation for how Luke, Leia, and Han get to where they were in The Force Awakens.
Leia told me that she had sensed the death of her son at the end of her Jedi path.
Like her father before her, Leia has a vision of a loved one dying and seeks to change the future.
One often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it.
Now, let's get the obvious out of the way. Leia doesn't think she needs the dark side here to change her future, so there's a lot less youngling killing, so she doesn't act like her father in that way, which, if she was told that, it would definitely make her a lot angrier than it would Luke, but she does still give up her Jedi training and chooses to instead build and defend the New Republic, and in doing so, separates herself and Han from Luke. Now, this obviously doesn't end their relationships, of course. She still wants Luke to train Ben a few years later, but Luke also ends up taking the wrong message from this.
However, you will be giving in to attachment to those that you love, and forsaking the way of the Jedi.
Grogu would be Luke's first student after Leia, and would have been the first student in his new academy had he not chosen to go back to Din Djarin, and at this point in the story, Luke has seen that attachment could be a good thing, that restricting it is what led to the rise of Vader, and that fostering it led to the redemption of Anakin Skywalker. But he has also seen the other side of it too. He sees that it's why he nearly gave in to the dark side, to protect Leia. And then she chooses attachment over being a Jedi, just like Grogu then does, and because he saw Leia make that choice, he feels that he must choose to forego attachment, to be as the Jedi once were. Which I'm sure some of you are wanting to rush to the comments to say Luke would still care about Han and Leia, he wouldn't give up his attachment to them, and I do agree. It's a very difficult decision, but one I think he makes because he loves his sister. Because her thinking that attachment is problematic to being a Jedi, that it would lead to him agreeing with his masters more than he would otherwise. But the separation of these three doesn't work well for Han and Leia either, though. In the book Bloodline, their relationship does have its struggles. I mean, I don't think any of us expected Han to be the kind of guy who would settle down and be a suburban dad.
How's your father's project coming along? I think he's almost done.
Add in the fact that Leia is throwing herself into the New Republic, and you can see why they would drift apart. Then you throw in the fact that Leia still has her fear that she will be responsible for their son's death, and you really get the thing that drives a wedge between Han and Leia. In her fear, she decides that Ben will be better off being trained as a Jedi by Luke, that he will be able to teach Ben to protect himself, and in this fear, she seals the fate of the galaxy. Because now you have a young kid whose mother is pushing him away, and whose father isn't great at expressing emotions, and doesn't fight to keep him around, making him think he doesn't want him around either. Then you're sending him to the only other family he has left, and his uncle is teaching him he shouldn't be attached. Doesn't that sound a little familiar?
What?
Yeah. Leia isn't the only one repeating the mistakes of her predecessors. Luke is making the same mistakes as the Jedi did before, even though he has his own attachments. And here's the thing about Luke, for as much as he's trying to teach his students to forego attachment, he still has his own attachments. That's why he agrees to train Ben in the first place. The old Jedi codes would say that he was too old to begin the training, and surely Luke knows that Ben is going to be feeling abandoned when he comes to his new academy. His parents are pushing him out right now, and he really needs a connection right now, somebody who he can attach to, but because Luke respects what Leia thinks the Jedi should be, instead he tries teaching Ben to let go, to forego his attachments, and that's the worst thing to be teaching him right now. And that's why the dark side is able to grow inside of Ben as he's becoming more powerful because of his training. And the other thing about Luke as a character is that he doesn't take things at face value. That's as true as it was in 1977 as it is today, because he wanted more out of life than to just be a farmer like his uncle. He doesn't take Yoda's training just as fact. He asks him questions. He asks him why. It's something that frustrates the Grand Master, and it's also part of why he didn't really want to train him in the first place.
Never his mind on where he was. What he was doing.
And it's also this ability that leads to him being able to redeem Anakin Skywalker, to see beyond the mask of Vader, to see the good in him. Something that Vader thought was gone forever even. And for better or for worse, this is what Luke does, and he does it with Ben too. He wants to see just how bad the dark side is growing within him, and he looks through the Force, tries to see his future, and it's worse than he can imagine. And there's only one moment that makes sense to me for what Luke could see that makes him want to take out his lightsaber and try to stop Ben before any of this can happen. So Luke, because he has an inability to actually practice what he is teaching, has an attachment and isn't able to overcome it. And he still does have the attachments to Han and Leia, and because of that, he makes the mistake that is the final push for Ben to embrace the dark side. And that's why this is still the same Luke who was in the original trilogy. If anything, he's almost being more himself in this moment since the Empire fell. He's had to embrace the legend of Luke Skywalker as a defense almost to deal with the fact that his sister gave up her Jedi training and gave up being around him to instead have her own attachments, to have a family. And because he's this Luke, he only has a moment of weakness. He's still grown, but he doesn't need the Emperor cackling at him anymore to realize, oh, this is wrong, I shouldn't be doing this. He just looks down and thinks, this kid hasn't done anything yet, but it's too late now. He's gone too far, and it doesn't matter what his intents are or how much he regrets it. What matters is what Ben sees, and what Ben sees is his master standing over him with his lightsaber drawn, ready to strike.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
God, imagine how bad it would have gone if Luke tried to pull that line on Ben after this. And in this moment, Luke has failed everyone. His students, the galaxy, his nephew, and worst of all to him, Han and Leia. And not only does he fails in the same way the Jedi failed before him. The hypocrisy and arrogance of the Jedi continued with him, and that's why he's so jaded about the Jedi. Not just his own failures, not the failures that led to the Empire, the fact that he knew better and still made the same mistakes. And it's not like he'd be able to reach his nephew in a way that he could redeem him. It's not the same as it is when he was trying to redeem Vader. I mean, it would be closer to like if Obi-Wan was trying to redeem Vader after burning him on Mustafar. The relationship that Luke and Ben had is closer to like what Anakin had with Mace Windu. That's what it would be like. It would be like if Windu was the one who was trying to redeem Vader.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
And with no way to redeem Kylo Ren, the only other option would be to kill him. But because he feels responsible for Ben turning to the dark side, and especially after that last push, I don't think Luke could raise a weapon to him even to defend himself. And that's before you consider the fact that this is still Han and Leia's son, and he will still have an attachment to him, so I don't think he could bring himself to kill Kylo in any world, which, yes, I hear the irony of when people complain about that in The Last Jedi, but yeah, I still think it's a moment, and that moment almost just kind of seals it. But either way, for whatever you may think of that, he still doesn't have anywhere to go. He can't bring himself to face Han and Leia after this because their fear was that they would lose their son, and he lost their son. So he's got nowhere to go and no way to fix his mistakes, so like Yoda before him, he goes into exile. But he does still seem to have a plan because he leaves a map to where he's going and leaves the last piece of that map with a trusted advisor who just so happens to be on Jakku with a pretty powerful girl who could either save or destroy the galaxy. Click on the card up here for full details.
No. No, I don't think I will.
And then, with their son having destroyed Luke's academy and embracing the dark side, Han and Leia break up because they can't deal with the fact that Leia wanted to send him away, and Han didn't, as they both go back to what they were comfortable with from before they met, Han being a smuggler and Leia a general. And then Leia sends her best pilot to Jakku to get the last piece of the map so she can bring back her brother, as her and Han learn of this girl who has to have some importance to Luke with her power and the fact that she's on the same planet as the person who he trusts with the map. But all three never reconcile over their failures, which at the end of the day was that they didn't stick together. They were stronger together than they were ever going to be apart, and together they could have fought Palpatine's reemergence, but at the end of the day, we are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters, and their legacy lives on through Rey, Finn, and Poe. How's that for a slice of fried gold? I know a lot of people have their problems with the sequels, of course I do too, but I do think that they handled these three pretty well for the most part, and I know some people seem to think Luke was the optimistic center of the universe, but I always thought he redeemed his father because of familial loyalty, but also because he didn't see what Vader had done, and Vader wasn't his failure. Anyway though, let me know in the comments what you think of this, or if you just want to say he's just Jake Skywalker. But if you enjoyed the video today, please drop a like, subscribe if you want more like this, and I'll see you next time on STV.